Shalom, everybody. Today we'll talk about how to actually fulfill the commandment of Zachor, of remembering. So, the most basic and simple halacha is that because it says very clearly in the Torah, Zachor et Yom Shabbat legadsho, remember the Sabbath day to sanctify it, then it's very simple that's all that God requires. But of course, the rabbis always gave us things to do because we are a very hands-on religion, like taking a lulav and blowing a shofar and reading a Megillah and all those other things that are actions that we take, even though our words can be considered actions. But thank God, also the opposite is also true, which means that if you use your mouth for anything that is negative, the Talmud discusses in many places that you can't get punished for speaking something bad. You can't be punished by a court of people for speaking, except for in the commandments that are related to animals. So the two examples are that you're not allowed to tell a donkey and an ox to plow together, and you're also not allowed to and you're also not allowed to tell them to move on Shabbat, as that is also an act of labor. But anyway, so let's go back to words. One fulfills the Torah obligation of Zachor by invoking the sanctity of Shabbat and specifying that it commemorates the creation of the world and the exodus from Egypt. However, the sages wished for everyone to fulfill this mitzvah using a precise and perfect text, so that the men of the Great Assembly, which created the Amida and other brachos, formulated a bracha that declares the sanctity of Shabbat. To ensure that Kiddush would be both dignified and pleasurable, they mandated that to be recited over a cup of wine prior to the meal. Some maintain that the Torah requires that Kiddush be recited over enjoyable food or drink. Again, action. It is customary, therefore, to recite the additional verses of Vayechulu before Kiddush at night. And now we're going to go into the Kiddush in the morning and to Havdalah. Many poskim maintain that Zachor obligates us to mark the end of Shabbat as well as its beginning. With the onset of Shabbat, there is a mitzvah to invoke its sanctity and essence, while when it ends, there is a mitzvah to identify the difference between the sacred Shabbat and the mundane weekdays, so Mavdil ben Kodesh Lechol. Therefore, according to many poskim, Havdalah recited at the end of Shabbat is a Torah obligation. Like Kiddush, this Torah obligation can be fulfilled with words alone. And if you're waiting for your spouse to come back from shul or otherwise, and you need to do melacha, the custom is to say Baruch HaMavdim Kodesh without invoking Hashem's name. It's not Baruch Atah Hashem, it's just Baruch HaMavdil. And so, because that is technically what the Torah requires, the sages ordained that it be said also over a cup of wine, and that's in the Rambam and the Mishnah Berurah. Sages mandated that Kiddush be recited on Shabbat day as well. So it says specifically, Zachor et Yom HaShabbat legadsho, the day of Shabbat, to honor the day and differentiate from weekdays. By beginning the meal with Kiddush, we make it clear that this is a special and important meal. Thus, we are reminded of the sanctity of Shabbat. So technically, based on what we just learned, we have three reminders at the beginning, the middle, and the end of this commandment of Zachor. However, since this is not the primary fulfillment of Zachor, because Shabbat commences on Friday night, the sages did not formulate a special bracha in honor of Shabbat. Rather, the bracha on wine, Berei Perek Geffen, is recited over a cup of wine. The custom is to say a few Shabbat-related verses beforehand, and this Kiddush is referred to as Kiddush HaRabbah, the Great Kiddush, which is a type of euphemism. I was trying to find before what the proper definition of euphemism is, but from what I remember from Robin Hood and from my former father-in-law, when you say John Little, he's definitely not little. My father-in-law's last name was Tawil, which in Arabic means tall, and he told me that not only he is short, and he was shorter than me. I'm only 5'4". so he said all of the men in his family were always short. So Tawil was that kind of sarcasm, and I'm guessing that there's other kinds of stuff like that. I think that most of the people that have Ashkenazi as their last name were actually Sephardi, so it meant that the original ancestor came from Ashkenaz, from Germany or somewhere else in Europe, and so that was how they identified them as you are Ashkenazi, even though you're not Ashkenazi anymore. And so I think that that's a better explanation, since I really don't know what the definition of euphemism is. As in fact, it is the Friday night Kiddush that is the more important one. And again, that is in the Mishnah Berurah. Even though the meal eaten on Shabbat day is considered more important than the nighttime meal, as explained below, so we'll get to that, the mitzvah of Zachor is nevertheless fulfilled through the Kiddush at night because the mitzvah is to mark Shabbat as it begins. Thus, after one finishes praying, he should hasten to make Kiddush, and many communities nowadays do it already in shul. One who was unable to make Kiddush Friday night has not lost out on the mitzvah. Rather, he should make Kiddush in the morning before eating his first meal. He should recite the Friday night Kiddush, but leave out the verses of Vayechulu since they are specifically connected to the evening. So just practically speaking, let's say that your wife was giving birth on Friday night, or you were on guard duty or whatever, and you weren't able to do Kiddush at night. So we say the Kiddush in the morning, but we don't say these verses of Vayechulu because they're not related to the day. If he did not make Kiddush before his meal in the morning, there is still a mitzvah to make Kiddush as long as the sun has not set. He should make sure to eat afterwards, as will be explained later. And in Benet Knesset Kippah, there was always somebody in charge of saying a very interesting made-up Kiddush for Shalosh Shudas, for the third meal. And they took the verses from the commandment of the manna, where Moshe tells the people that there is the gift of Shabbat, but they're still not commanded. So he says, Ichlu Hayom. So the word Hayom is mentioned 3 times in those verses. And so that's how that custom came to be. As far as I know, it's a Hasidic minhag, because it's not in the Mishnah Berurah and it's not in other sources that I looked at. So, since according to Torah law, one can verbally fulfill the obligation of Zachor, some maintain that with the recitation of the middle bracha of the Amidah at Marv, which invokes Shabbat, one has already fulfilled this obligation. However, others question this for 2 reasons. First, people do not generally intend to fulfill the mitzvah of Zachor with this prayer, as it's been our custom now for hundreds or maybe even thousands of years to do it over the wine. And we maintain that mitzvot require intent. Second, it is possible that one must mention in Kiddush that Shabbat is a commemoration of the Egyptian Exodus. In the Amidah, the Exodus is not juxtaposed with the sanctity of Shabbat Friday night, but of course, we talked already about how it is in the morning. Therefore, in practice, we fulfill the Torah commandment in accordance with the sage's directive by making Kiddush over wine. Furthermore, we have already seen that some authorities maintain that fulfilling a Torah obligation requires wine. And so we will stop there. And if anybody else has examples of euphemisms, I will be very happy